Hello everyone, hope you guys are doing well. In this video, we will go through 55 sample questions and answer them in detail to help you prepare for the AZ-900 Microsoft Azure Fundamentals exam. In case if you like to purchase the entire set of practice questions, use the link in the description below. I request you to comment if you would like me to do this sample test for any other Azure certification, and do subscribe, share and like the video. Let's get started. A company has just set up an Azure virtual private connection between its on-premises network and the Azure virtual network. Does the company have to pay additional cost to transfer several gigabits of data from their on-premises network to Azure? Refer to the bandwidth pricing page where it is mentioned that data transfers into Azure is free of cost. Also, data transferred within an Azure region is not charged, whereas data egress beyond a certain limit will cost you. So the correct answer is no, the company doesn't have to pay to transfer data from their on-premises network to Azure. You set up a free Azure account. After first 30 days of the account activation, you can only access a subset of services. Is this statement true or not? Well, after you create an Azure account, you get some Azure services that are free for 12 months, and some others will always remain free. To access the remainder of Azure services, you need to upgrade your Azure account from free trial to pay as you go. So the answer is yes, you can only access a subset of services after the 30-day trial period ends. A company is upgrading its current Azure AD free plan to the Azure AD Premium P1 plan. Does Microsoft provide the same feature set for both the plans? Well, Azure Active Directory comes in 4 editions: Free, Office 365 Apps, Premium P1 and Premium P2. When you sign up for a free Azure account, you get the free edition of Azure Active Directory. You can also choose to upgrade to the Premium P1 plan if you need premium features like password protection, conditional access, etc., which do not come in the free plan. So yes, the Azure Active Directory free plan and the Premium P1 plan are quite different, as the Premium plan has different additional feature sets. A company is planning to host 2 virtual machines in Azure as shown below. The question is if both the virtual machines always generate the same monthly cost. Although both the VMs are of the same size, their cost may not be the same if they are hosted in different Azure regions. For example, for the B1S instance, hosting in East US cost $0.0104 every hour, whereas hosting in West US cost $0.0124 every hour. So region plays a great role in the pricing of a VM. So both the VMs would not generate the same monthly cost. A company stores 1 terabyte of data in Azure Blob Storage. Would the cost of data storage be the same regardless of the region the data is stored in? Again, if you just check out the pricing page of Azure Blobs, the data storage prices do change as we update the region. Similar to how an Azure region affects the pricing of a VM, a region affects the pricing of Azure Blob Storage too. So the data storage cost will not be the same regardless of the region. A company has a set of Azure VMs. One of the machines was down due to issues with the underlying Azure infrastructure for an extended period of time. So it breached the standard SLA defined by Microsoft. How will Microsoft reimburse the downtime cost? Microsoft provides SLA credits calculated as a percentage of the bill that the SLA was missed. These service credits are reimbursed in your next month's bill, and the amount of credits that you receive depends on the threshold that is missed for any Azure service. So the correct answer is option C, providing service credits to the customer. A company deploys a number of Azure resources in their subscription. They want to be informed if the cost of any resource goes beyond a certain threshold. Which of the following can help you achieve this? Azure Monitor alerts notify you of any events or changes in metric values on Azure resources. Azure Advisor alerts lets you receive recommendations on how to optimize your Azure deployments. So they both do not deal with Azure cost and billing. Tags are used just for organizing your Azure resources. They do not have any alerting facility. The obvious answer is to create a budget in Azure Cost Management where you can set spending limits and receive alerts if the cost goes beyond the threshold. For example, you can create a budget in your subscription at a particular scope, set a budget for a specific duration, and enter the budget amount. With the alerting feature, you can receive alerts if the spending reaches the threshold value. A company wants to try out a couple of Azure services that are available in public preview. Is it true that services in public preview can only be used via the Azure command line interface? Well, that's not really true. You can access the preview features from Azure portal as well. For example, let's just check out Azure Active Directory and you can see preview features like Virtual Assistant accessible from the Azure portal. A company currently has the following unused resources in its subscription: 10 user accounts, 5 user groups in Azure AD, 10 public IP addresses, and 10 network interfaces. They want to reduce the cost of resources and decide to remove the user groups from Azure AD. Would this fulfill the requirement? Well, if you look at the pricing for Azure Active Directory, you can create up to 500,000 objects even in the free version of Azure AD. These objects include both users and groups. So removing user groups will not cut down the cost. If you want to cut down the cost, then a better choice would be to remove public IP addresses, as each IP address is billed by the hour. A company has launched a set of virtual machines. After some time, they hit a constraint. They cannot provision additional VMs. Which of the following can be done so they can provision more VMs? Well, each Azure resource comes with some usage quotas. To view them, go to your subscription and click Usage and Quotas. Select a resource provider, and for any particular region, you can view the limits for each service. So you cannot create resources beyond those limits. In case if you need to increase the quota limit for any region, you can request for quota increase and raise a support request, which is the right answer to this question as well. Your company is using Azure AD for authentication of resources. Does Azure AD has capabilities to implement authorization using Azure RBAC to secure your resources? For authentication, there are multiple ways to secure the sign-in process. As shown here, you can use additional security options such as multi-factor authentication and self-service password reset. For authorization, you use Azure RBAC roles. These roles define who has access to resources and what they can do with those resources. So the answer is yes, Azure AD has capabilities to implement authorization using Azure RBAC to secure your resources. A company wants to ensure that suspicious attacks and threats to their Azure resources in their account are prevented. Which of the following helps prevent such attacks by using built-in sensors? Options A and C are incorrect. since they are used for protecting identities in Azure AD. Option B is incorrect since this is only a solution to protect against DDoS attacks. So that leaves us with only Azure Advanced Threat Protection. First, there is a terminology change. Azure Advanced Threat Protection is now called the Microsoft Defender for Identity. The Microsoft Defender uses sensors for monitoring suspicious activities and events. So option D is the right answer. A company which deploys resources to Azure wants to have the ability to manage user access to resources across multiple subscriptions. Which of the following can help you achieve this requirement? Option A is invalid because resource groups are appropriate for grouping your resources. Option C is incorrect as Azure policies are valid only within one subscription. Option D is incorrect since Azure App Service is for hosting your web application. The correct answer is Azure Management Groups, which are containers for managing access across multiple Azure subscriptions. A company plans to use Azure Firewall Service. Would the firewall service encrypt all network traffic sent from Azure to the internet? Well, the firewall service is primarily used for protecting your network infrastructure. In this image, traffic from on-premises to Azure is filtered by Azure Firewall. Other than that, it doesn't do any encryption of the traffic originating from Azure. So option B is the right choice. A company wants to protect their resources against DDoS attacks and also get real-time attack metrics. Which of the following should they opt for? Well, 4 different options for DDoS protection is given, but you should know that Azure provides only 2 DDoS service offerings: DDoS Protection Basic and DDoS Protection Standard. So that eliminates the last 2 options. Here is the documentation page for DDoS Protection Standard. Every property in Azure is protected by DDoS Protection Basic at no additional cost. To enhance DDoS mitigation, you can upgrade to DDoS Standard. If you look at the features, you can see that the standard service offering provides attack metrics, which is exactly what's asked in the question. So DDoS Protection Standard is the right choice. A company has a set of resources in Azure. Would the Azure Advisor tool give recommendations on how to reduce the cost of running Azure virtual machines? Azure Advisor is a personalized cloud consultant that helps you follow best practices to optimize your Azure deployments. It recommends solutions that can help you improve the cost effectiveness, security, reliability, operational excellence, and performance of your Azure resources. So you can view all the cost recommendations related to any Azure resource here in this section. Here, you can see that Advisor recommends you to right size or shut down the underutilized virtual machines to save cost. So the answer is yes. Azure Advisor does give recommendations on how to reduce the cost of running Azure virtual machines. A company wants to make use Azure Advisor tool to check if they would give recommendations based on tenancy. Well, going back to the Azure portal again, these are the areas of recommendations given by Azure Advisor. So Advisor doesn't offer any suggestions on tenancy. So the correct answer is no. For a set of virtual machines in Azure, a company wants to find out which user shuts down a particular VM in the last 7 days. Which of the following can help with this requirement? Well, if you want to know who has done any operation on a VM, you can check out that VM's activity log. Activity logs provide detailed diagnostic and auditing information for Azure resources. And this activity log is available for every Azure resource that you create. If you need to monitor a set of VMs or a set of resources, then go to Azure Monitor and check out the activity log there. Here, you have the ability to add filters to choose a specific resource group or a particular resource and view your data. Your company wants to use recommendations given by the Azure Advisor tool. If they implement the Advisor tool's recommendations, would it decrease the company's security score? Well, there are two things here that the question is talking about. First is the Azure Advisor score, which is in preview. This score is composed based on 5 categories like cost, security, reliability, operational excellence, and performance. Note that security is just one of the factors for computing the advisor score. Whereas Azure Security Center gives out something called as Secure Score, which is solely based on security issues. You improve the secure score by implementing the security recommendations given by the Security Center. Now, the question asks whether implementing Azure Advisor Tools recommendations would decrease the security score given by the Azure Security Center. Well, if you implement the advisor recommendations, either the secure score will stay constant or it will go up in case you are implementing recommendations related to security. So don't think there is any chance that the secure score will go down. A company is planning to use network security groups. The question is if network security groups could encrypt all network traffic sent from Azure to the internet. When you create a VM, a network interface is created for the VM, which enables the VM to communicate with the internet. Here, if you look at the settings of network interface, it is attached to a VM and a network security group is associated with it, which just contains a list of inbound and outbound security rules. By looking at these rules, you get the idea that they decide what traffic flows in and out of the VM. In a nutshell, think of network security groups as a firewall that filter the outbound and the inbound traffic to the stuff that they are attached to, either a VM or a subnet in a virtual network. However, they do not encrypt the traffic. So the correct answer is no. A company tags Azure resources and they want to ensure that when resource groups are created, they have to contain a tag with the name organization and the value WizLabs. You recommend using Azure policies. Would this recommendation fulfill the requirement? Yes, of course, you can enforce this requirement via Azure policy. So let me just demonstrate how you would do that. So first go to Azure policy and within Azure policy, go to assignments and click assign policy. Specify the scope, which is the level at which the policy should apply. It can be either a resource group or a subscription. Then choose a policy definition. Since we need tags on resource groups, filter the policy definition accordingly. We already have a built-in policy definition, require a tag and its value on resource groups. So let's select that. In the parameter section, enter the tag name, which is organization, and the tag value WizLabs. Once done, create the policy assignment. Azure policy would make sure that the resource groups in the selected scope will have the appropriate tags before they are created. If you need any variation of this policy, you can select any policy under the definitions where you can see its raw definition in JSON. Duplicate this policy, make changes to the JSON and create your own custom definition. So the correct answer is yes, Azure policies does fulfill the requirement. A company wants to ensure that Azure complies with the rules and regulations of the region for hosting Azure resources. Which of the following can assist the company in getting the required compliance reports? Option A is incorrect as Azure AD is used for identity management. Option C is incorrect since Azure Advisor provides recommendations to follow best practices to optimize your Azure deployments. Option D is incorrect since Security Center strengthens the security posture of your workloads in Azure. So, the only service that can assist with getting the compliance reports is Microsoft Trust Center, which provides information about compliance and privacy in the Microsoft Cloud. For example, how Microsoft addresses specific requirements of GDPR. A company has deployed a set of Azure VMs. They want their IT team to get alerts whenever the CPU of the VMs go beyond a certain threshold. Which of the following service could be used for this requirement? Well, in Azure Monitor, you can create alerts to monitor your resources. Let me show you a demo. Create a new alert rule and first select a resource which you wish to monitor. In our case, it will be the VM and then select an alert condition. The scenario in this question requires the IT team to be alerted whenever the CPU goes beyond a particular threshold. So search for CPU and there you go. Percentage CPU indicates the percentage of allocated compute units currently in use by the VMs. So let's pick this metric which seems to be very ideal for our scenario, and here you get information of the CPU trends over the past few hours for your VM, which will really help you to plan for the alert condition. Based on this data, let's trigger the alert rule when average CPU percentage is greater than 80%. And this is going to average for the past 5 minutes, and you can also check for probably say every minute. So every minute the rule will check if the average CPU utilization for the past 5 minutes is beyond 80% or not, and if so, it triggers the alert and sends the notifications. Azure Monitor is the right answer for this question. A company has a resource group as shown below. They want to ensure that resources within this resource group do not get accidentally deleted. Which of the following would you use for this purpose? Option A is incorrect since access control is for setting permissions on resources. Option B is incorrect too since Azure policy is used for governance purposes. Option D is incorrect since diagnostic setting is for collecting diagnostic information like crash dumps, event logs, etc. from Azure resources. The correct choice is Azure Resource Logs, which prevent any unexpected changes to a resource. For example, let's log this resource Azure VM. You create either a delete or a read-only log, where delete logs prevent you from deleting the resource and read-only logs prevent you from updating or deleting a resource. So once the log is created, if anyone tries to delete or accidentally delete the VM, they get this failure notification. So option C is the right answer. An IT administrator will use the PowerShell script to create several VMs in Azure. For running the script, you provide a Linux machine which has the Azure CLI tools with PowerShell 5.x installed. Would this solution fit the requirement? Well, in the Azure documentation, it is mentioned that Azure PowerShell works with PowerShell 5.1 on Windows and PowerShell 7.x and higher on all other platforms. So clearly 5.x is not going to cut the ice for the Linux machine. A company deploys a set of Azure VMs. They want to ensure that the services on the VMs are still accessible even if a single data center goes down. So they deploy a set of virtual machines to 2 or more availability zones. Would this fulfill the requirement? Now, first you need to know that Azure availability zones are unique physical locations within a region, and each zone is made up of 1 or more data centers equipped with independent power and cooling. So if you deploy a set of VMs across 2 or more availability zones, of course you are immune to any particular data center failure, as if any data center fails, only that availability zone goes down. you still have the others up and running. So the answer is yes. Can regions be used to replicate data asynchronously across other multiple regions for disaster recovery protection? Well, if you build your applications across Azure availability zones, you can synchronously replicate your applications and data across availability zones within an Azure region. And if you use Azure region pairs, where a region is a pair of another region, typically located miles apart, you can asynchronously replicate data across Azure regions for disaster recovery protection. So, yes, Azure regions can be used to replicate data asynchronously across multiple regions for disaster recovery protection. Your company uses Azure App Service to host its set of web applications. In case of need, as per the requirement, does Azure provide the ability to scale the platform automatically? Of course, you do have options for both scaling up and scaling out of your app in Azure App Service. You can scale up your app to get more CPU, memory, disk space by changing the pricing tier of the app service plan that your app belongs to. Upgrading your pricing tier brings in extra features like custom domains, certificates, staging slots, auto scaling, and more. And within a set pricing tier, you can scale out to increase the number of VM instances that run your app. So the correct answer is yes. A company has a VPN device that will be used in a site-to-site connection from an on-premises location to Azure. Which of the following would be used to represent the VPN device in Azure? Well, to answer this question, let's actually go through the process of setting up a site-to-site VPN connection which connects your on-premises network to Azure Virtual Network. To set up the network connection, first you create a VPN gateway in Azure. This VPN gateway handles all the communication from the Azure side. The site-to-site connection requires a VPN device located on premises which will handle all the communication from the on-premises network. So effectively, the site-to-site creates a connection between a VPN device in on-premises network and the VPN gateway in Azure. And to represent this VPN device in Azure, you create a specific object called the local network gateway, which is the right answer to this question. Which of the following in Azure provides a platform for defining the dependencies between resources so they are deployed in the correct order? Option A is incorrect since resource groups provide a means to categorize resources deployed to Azure. It is not a platform. Option B is incorrect since Azure policies help you to govern Azure resources. Option C is incorrect as Azure Management Groups helps you to organize your subscriptions and apply governance controls. Azure Resource Manager is the deployment and management service for Azure. It is a management layer, and whenever you create or update any resource via PowerShell or Azure Portal, you are interacting with Azure Resource Manager. Azure Resource Manager is the right answer as it defines and handles the dependencies between resources so they are deployed in the correct order. A company is setting up a solution on Azure platform which has the following key requirement. Provide a managed service that could be used to manage and scale container-based applications. Which of the following would be best suited for this requirement? Well, pretty much all the options are irrelevant to managing container-based applications except Azure Kubernetes Service. So that's the right choice. Azure DevTest Labs provides developers and testers to quickly create their own dev and test environments without waiting for their operations team. Azure Event Grid allows you to easily build applications with event-based architectures. A company is setting up a solution in Azure which would have the key requirement: provide a platform for creating workflows. Which of the following Azure service would be best suited? Azure Logic Apps helps you to design and create workflows that integrate apps and data across organizations, which is the right answer to this question. Azure Databricks is a data analytics platform for running Apache Spark workloads. Azure App Service is a PaaS web hosting service for building web and mobile applications. And Azure Application Insights helps you to monitor your web applications live. A company's solution on Azure platform has the following key requirements: provide the ability to store petabytes of data and be able to run complex queries across the data. Which of the following would be best suited for this requirement? Well, the ability to store data can only be provided by either Azure Storage Account or Azure Synapse Analytics. Azure Firewall, in a typical sense, is a firewall which protects your network infrastructure. And Azure Application Gateway is a kind of Azure load balancer but operates at the OSI layer 7, which means they make routing decisions based on the URL of a web page. But then Azure Storage Account doesn't really provide any ability to run complex queries. You can only store data in various services like blobs, queues, files, and disk, each designated for different use case. That leaves us with Azure Synapse Analytics, which earlier was Azure Data Warehouse. It brings together data warehousing and big data analytics together. A company for its solution in Azure has the following key requirement: provide an efficient way to distribute web content to users across the world. Which of the following would be best suited? A content delivery network or a CDN is a distributed network of servers that can efficiently deliver web content to users. So Azure CDN is the right choice. Azure HT Insights and SQL Data Warehouse are big data analytics services in the cloud. And Azure Load Balancer balances the traffic to your application and distributes the incoming traffic against a set of backend VMs. A company has just set up an Azure subscription and an Azure tenant. They want to implement a way to group the resources logically. Which of the following could be used for this requirement? Well, Azure Resource Group is a container that holds related resources for an Azure solution and perfectly fits what's asked in the question. Azure regions are just a set of data centers at physical locations, and Azure High Availability Zones are unique physical locations within a region with independent power, cooling, and networking. An organization has the following key requirement: provide a cloud service that makes it easy, fast, and cost effective to analyze streaming data using open source frameworks like Apache Hadoop. Which of the following Azure service meet the criteria? There are many Azure services that can analyze streaming data, but the indication of open source frameworks like Apache Hadoop means that the correct choice will be Azure HT Insight, as it is a managed Apache Hadoop service in the Azure cloud. All the other options are incorrect. A team as an object in the Azure Blob Storage account. A partial snapshot of the properties is given below. Which of the following needs to be done before the object can be accessed? Well, just know that there are three different access tiers which allow you to store blob object data. They are hot, cold, and archive. Hot tier is for storing data that's accessed frequently. Cold tier is for storing data that's accessed infrequently. And archive tier is for storing data that's very rarely accessed. In the question, the access tier of the blob object is archive, which means the blob is considered offline and you just cannot read or modify it. However, the metadata of the blob is online, which means you can still list the blob and its properties. Since we need to retrieve and access the data stored in the archive access tier, we first need to rehydrate the archived blob to an online tier, which means we move the blob from the archive tier to either a hot or a cold tier by running some PowerShell commands. So, rehydrating the blob object is necessary before you can access the object in the archive tier. A company has a set of IT engineers responsible for implementing and managing the Azure resources. They have a set of CLI installed on the on-premises workstations that have the following flavors of operating systems: Windows 10, Mac OS, and Ubuntu. Which of the following tools can you use on the Ubuntu machines? The Azure portal can be viewed on any browser and hence can be viewed on almost all the operating systems. The Azure CLI is available on all platforms and so is Azure PowerShell. So option D is the right answer. A company setting up a solution in Azure has the following key requirement. Give the ability to process data from millions of sensors. Which of the below Azure services can be used for this purpose? Azure IoT Hub acts as a central hub for bidirectional communication between IoT applications and millions of sensors, which is the most suitable answer to this question. There is only an Azure bot service for building intelligent bots and nothing like Azure AI bot. Azure Functions is a serverless compute service to execute your code, and Azure Machine Learning, as the name indicates, helps you to build machine learning workflows on Azure. A company wants to migrate its current on-premises servers to Azure. They need to ensure that the servers are running even if a single Azure data center goes down. Which of the following terms refer to the solution that needs to be in place to fulfill this requirement? Options B and C are incorrect as they refer to how best you can scale up or down based on demand. Option D is incorrect since this refers to transferring data across network with minimal delay. Fault tolerance refers to the ability of a system to continue operating without interruption even when one or more of its components fail. Since we need to ensure that the Azure servers continue running even if a single data center goes down, fault tolerance is the right answer. An application consists of a set of virtual machines hosted in a virtual network. In a month, the application has a load of around 20% for 3 weeks. During the last week, the load on the application is 80%. Which of the following benefits of Azure Cloud would ensure the cost and efficiency of the underlying application infrastructure? What you can do for this scenario is define a virtual machine scale set in Azure and create an initial set of VMs to run for the first 3 weeks. Then add a scaling policy to add more virtual machines to support the application during the last week. So this is called scale out. And add another scaling policy to remove extra VMs at the end of last week to save on cost. This is scale in. This concept refers to elasticity, which is defined as the degree to which a system is able to adapt to workload changes by provisioning and deprovisioning resources in an automatic manner such that at each point in time, the available resources matches the current demand as closely as possible. All other options are incorrect. A company is planning to implement the below architecture between on-premises and Azure cloud infrastructure. Which of the following best describes the above cloud model? The image shows that there are infrastructure resources hosted in both the Azure public cloud and your on-premises network. This is an example of hybrid cloud model. It is neither a public cloud or a private cloud because the image shows the presence of both the on-premises network and the public cloud. Option C is incorrect as there is nothing mentioned related to a pure government cloud setup. You have to identify the correct concept behind each of the following cloud service descriptions. Which of the following is the right concept behind the description? A cloud service that can be accessed quickly by users over the internet. Well, if you can access any service quickly with very less delay, that's called low latency. Option A is incorrect since fault tolerance ensures that a service is running even in the event of a failure. Option B is incorrect since disaster recovery ensures that a service still runs from an alternative location in the event of a disaster. Option C is incorrect since dynamic scalability ensures that a service transparently responds to rapidly changing resource requirements. When an organization can decommission its private cloud infrastructure hosted in its data center, well, they can decommission when all their servers are migrated to the public Azure cloud and you have no dependency on your private cloud or on-premises environment. That's the best time to think about decommissioning. Which of the following is the right Azure Cloud Service benefit that matches the following description? A cloud service that can be restored in the event of a catastrophic loss. If you can recover your applications and data from another region in the event of a natural disaster, then it's called disaster recovery. We have already discussed about other terms earlier, so I will skip to the next question. You are trying to understand the different cloud models. Which of the following are advantages of using the public cloud? Choose two answers from the options given below. Public cloud does have lower capital cost as you don't have to purchase any hardware or software and pay only for the service you use. And a vast network of servers ensures that public cloud is highly reliable against any failures. So options A and C are the right choices. Higher maintenance is incorrect as you don't have to provide any maintenance. Your service provider provides the required maintenance. A company is planning to purchase Azure AD Tier Premium P2 for their Azure account. Does the Azure AD Premium P2 tier come with an SLA of 99.9%? Well, there is no SLA if you are just using the free tier of Azure Active Directory. However, if you use even the basic or any of the premium tiers, you get an SLA guarantee of 99.9% availability. So the correct answer is yes. A company is planning to create several virtual machines in Azure. Which of the following is the right category to which the Azure virtual machine belongs to? Well, all that has to do with physical infrastructure or IaaS, which means infrastructure as a service. Here, all the servers and storage, networking firewalls and data center belong to the IaaS category. That means services like Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Storage Accounts, Azure Virtual Networking fall into IaaS category. SaaS and PaaS use IaaS components and are built on top of IaaS. So virtual machines belong to the IaaS category. A company wants to ensure that whenever users authenticate to Azure, they have to make use of multi-factor authentication. Which of the following can help them achieve this? You can use Privileged Identity Management or PIM to enforce multi-factor authentication to activate any role. Now, if you ask what exactly does PIM do? Well, your organization has users who have lots of permissions to resources in Azure or Azure AD. PIM just makes sure that only the ones who really require access and only for the time they need the access gets them. In other words, PIM mitigates the risk of excessive or unnecessary permissions on resources. And enforcing MFA is just one of the ways to do it. So, Azure Privileged Identity Management is the right answer. Option B is incorrect since Azure Security Center is just a unified infrastructure security management system in Azure. A company is planning to host 2 virtual machines in Azure as shown below. When the virtual machine demo VM is stopped, you will still incur cost for the storage attached to the virtual machine. Is this the correct understanding? Well, first refer to this VM architecture. You have the VM with NIC in the virtual network. For the VM's pricing, you also get a temporary storage, but you wouldn't store your data there as the data will go away when you restart the VM. So you have the managed disk that you purchase and attach to the VM. Even if the VM goes down, you still have the managed disk and later you can attach this disk to any other VM and recover your data. And because the managed disk is a separate entity from the VM, it is built separately too. For example, go to the Azure pricing calculator page and add the virtual machine. The cost that you see here is for the RAM, the vCPUs, and the temporary storage that you get for every VM. And for this VM, you can add additional disk. Each of these disks incur additional cost and you can see that the VM's price gets updated when you add them. So the statement in the question is true. The disks attached to a VM have different costs associated with them. A company has the following key requirement: an integration solution for the deployment of code. Which of the following would be best suited? Azure DevOps consists of a large set of tools related to DevOps. Among these, you have Azure Pipelines, which can be used to build, test, and deploy the code. Other options do not deal with code deployment and hence are incorrect. An IT engineer needs to create a virtual machine in Azure. Currently, he has a Windows desktop with Azure CLI. Which of the following would allow him to use the Azure CLI? Choose 2 answers from the options given below. Well, he can use either the PowerShell window or the Windows command prompt to execute his CLI commands to create a VM. Control Panel, File Explorer, and Print Explorer are not really the tools you would use to interact with Azure. A company is planning to use Azure storage accounts. They have the following requirement: store 2 terabytes of data and store 1,000,000 files. Would using Azure storage fulfill these requirements? If you look at the Microsoft documentation, it mentions that Azure storage has a maximum storage capacity of 5 petabytes, which is much higher than the required 2 terabytes of data. And there is no limit for the maximum number of blobs, tables, queues, or messages that can be stored within a storage account. So the requirement in this question is perfectly satisfied by Azure storage account. A company deploys a web server and a database server as shown in the architecture diagram below. You have to ensure that traffic restrictions are in place so that the database server can only communicate with the web server. Which of the following would you recommend for implementing these restrictions? Option B is incorrect since Azure Service Bus is just a messaging system. Option C is incorrect since a local network gateway represents a VPN device in a site-to-site VPN connection. Option D is incorrect since a virtual private gateway connects networks together via the internet. The correct option is network security groups, which, when associated with a subnet, acts as a firewall to either allow or deny the traffic. NSDs will ensure that the traffic from the internet will not reach the backend subnet. Coming to the last question, a company wants to make use of an Azure service in public preview. Are Azure services in public preview available only to a selective portion of customers? Well, services in public preview are only available upon request to any of the customers. It is not exclusive only for a set of customers. So the answer is no. Once you are done, submit the test and you can verify your performance from the result. Also, you get the performance report domain wise, so you can analyze the questions for any particular domain and you will see all the questions related to that domain, their correct answers and explanations for each question, and also links to the Microsoft documentation in case you like to learn the concept in depth. So if you are seriously thinking about clearing the AZ-900 exam, check the description for the link to entire practice test that cover the length and breadth of all the objectives in the exam. Also, please comment if you would like me to do this sample test for any other Azure or AWS certification, and do subscribe, share and like the video.